Labour says families with teenagers could be left worse off by a teenagers' tax hidden in the budget. The party says more than 6,000 families with teens face losing more in their Working for Families payments than they get in tax cuts. Let's talk about this further with Labour's leader, Andrew Little. He's in the Wellington studio. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what's the deal here?
Well, what we've discovered is that when you look at families with teenagers aged between 16 and 18, the combination of the tax cuts but with the changes to Working for Families means actually they'll have less money in their pockets, or they'll be worse off from 1 April next year than they are now. It's a strange anomaly, but that's the impact of the changes announced last week.
And that's going to be that real world outcome, that these people are worse off?
It's a matter of hundreds of dollars a year for some families, or most families, but it's the sort of money you'd spend on your school fees, your school trips, those sorts of things. So it is stuff that makes a difference over the course of a year, but it's an anomaly in a package that the government said was designed to help low and middle income families. It doesn't do that in every case.
OK, I have to say, we ran some of the figures this morning and I'm not entirely clear about some of this. So, for example, we ran the 66,000 as the income with one teenager at home, which was one of the examples that you had in your press release you sent to us. In that circumstance, people end up losing 36 cents a week, which doesn't seem like an awful lot in itself. But then when you add in the accommodation supplement, those families actually end up potentially better off to the tune of an extra $80.
I don't know what variables you're using. The least, or the smallest amount.
That's just putting it into the calculator in the way that you, with the figures you gave.
Sure. The smallest amount of loss in any one year is something like $79 or something. So I don't know where your 36 cents comes from.
Yeah, it was $19 a year.
And then it depends what age of the teenage child you're looking at, because what's happened in the package last week is that the rate for your oldest teenage child remains unchanged. For other teenage children, your allowance increases. So people with teenagers at the 13 to 15 age bracket are better off because there's more provision for them. For the 16 to 18-year-olds, the figure hasn't changed from now to 1 April next year. So that's why, with higher abatement rates and the lower threshold, actually those families are worse off as a result.
But some other figures we ran this morning, which again, I don't quite understand how this adds up. Another example was a West Auckland family, an income of $47,000 a year. We put in an arbitrary number of $500 in rent weekly. They currently would get an accommodation supplement of $95, but when you run it under the calculator, that accommodation supplement's going to more than double. So they're actually going to get over $100 extra.
I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen your figures. You're just presenting to me verbally right now is not particularly helpful. But these are the
figures that you gave us that we've put in the calculator to see what happened. Isn't the situation here that you're ignoring the accommodation supplement?
No, well, we've made it pretty clear that this is the consequence of the tax changes and the Working for Families. The accommodation supplement will vary heavily across different regions, obviously, and depending on what your rent is. So it's hard to predict a single outcome when it comes to the accommodation supplement. You can predict what's happening with the tax changes and the Working for Families changes because they're applied universally depending on your income thresholds.
But isn't the accommodation supplement quite an important part of this? Because otherwise you're essentially trying to prize apart the family package that the government's put forward in the budget, essentially to show the stuff that you oppose, which is the tax changes, and you've been clear about that.
Yeah, and I think the significance of the accommodation supplement is that the changes announced last week are very much a catch-up. Remember, it hasn't changed since 2007, and in spite of the government saying that, or at least actually turning a deaf ear to the fact that rents have gone up significantly, housing costs have gone up significantly. So, some people would do well out of the accommodation supplement, but it is still just playing catch up after no increase since 2007.
Isn't that the crucial part, though? People may do well with the accommodation supplement, and in the real world, that's the situation people are going to be faced with. So while on paper you can do these sums and you can say people are going to lose out because of the tax changes, because that's going to be then topped up by the accommodation supplement, which is what the government has said is going to happen.
But people are
not going to be worse off.
Except not in every. The problem with the accommodation supplement.
So how many people are going to be worse off then?
So the calculations we've done show roughly 6,000 families affected by the changes that affect those families with older teenagers, about 20,000 families affected by the change that says that if you're a single child family, you're going to get less than a childless family from 1 April next year under the tax and working for families changes.
But aren't you trying to cherry pick, though, Mr. Little, from the package, which isn't really anything much more than an academic argument and not potentially a very fair way to present this?
The government has spent weeks telling everybody that they've got a families package aimed at low and middle income earners. There are gaps opening up in it. If you're a single child family, you're going to get less next year than your childless family. If you've got teenagers, you're actually going to get less than you're getting now. The accommodation supplement is so variable across different individual families. You can't make a reliable estimate about what's going to happen there, but you can look at what's happening and what the impact is of the tax changes and working for families changes. In the end, the total package, you see what's happening with the total package. Our overall complaint is, of course, that it's actually skewed to higher income earners. Of the total package, working for families, tax, accommodation supplement, 5 out of every $7 goes into the tax package. There's more money spent on tax breaks for the top 10% of earners than there are on the total working for families package, which is the more targeted part of the package. It is a totally skewed package, and all we're doing is discovering that there are other anomalies as well.
Appreciate your time. Labour's leader Andrew Little there speaking in the Wellington studio.